Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story.
Did you kill them?
No comments.
The teenage murderer who wanted to be the UK's deadliest school shooter, today sentenced to at least 49 years behind bars for killing his family. In Ukraine and in Russia, a ceasefire broken, but Donald Trump insists negotiations to end the war are on track. A United Nations staff member is killed and a British aid worker is seriously injured in an explosion in Gaza. The cubs of the caliphate, we go inside a detention camp for ISIS families in northern Syria. Plus, the Russian spy ship today escorted out of UK waters after being spotted off the coast of Norfolk. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Nicholas Prosper wanted to become a notorious mass murderer. Over the course of a year, he plotted to kill more than 30 4- and 5-year-olds at his former primary school. He bought a shotgun with a forged licence. He chose the day, Friday the 13th, and his outfit, black and yellow, carefully. Then, when his mother tried to stop him, he shot her in the head. then killed his brother and his sister. He was arrested by chance on his way to the school in what senior detectives described as a sliding doors moment. Today, he was jailed for life with a minimum term of 49 years, as our national correspondent Tom Parmenter reports.
Okay, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do.
They didn't know it, but the officers who arrested this teenager had prevented a school massacre.
It's not murder.
It's not murder, Nicholas Prosper said. But he had just shot dead 3 members of his own family. He'd practiced at home how he would kill. He'd researched and planned every detail and was on his way to his old primary school in Luton, targeting 4- and 5-year-old children.
His ambition was most definitely notoriety and to be known as being responsible for the biggest school shooting there's ever been on record.
Did you kill them?
No comments.
He refused to answer questions, but later told a prison nurse precisely what he'd intended to do. He also wrote down his plans and noted, "My effing mother messed it up." He'd planned to shoot his mum, Juliana Falcon, while she slept in the family's 8th-floor flat. But she was awake and interrupted him. She saw the shotgun he had in his room. In the violent struggle that followed, he shot her dead, along with his sister Giselle, who was 13, and his brother Kyle, aged 16. A neighbour heard it all and called 999.
Hiya, yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit rattled. Upstairs, just gone up to knock on the door, sorry. And I heard a massive bang, sounded like a gunshot.
It disrupted his plan and made him leave the flats 3 hours before the school would open. In that time, he was arrested by a police patrol. The judge sentenced him to a minimum term of 49 years in prison.
You have also expressed no remorse and no sorrow. Indeed, when asked by the psychiatrist if you would try to commit another massacre, you replied, "Well, that's their job, to stop me getting the weapons if I get released." There is no suggestion that you didn't understand the law or that killing people is morally wrong. You just didn't care.
Inside court, his father was in tears. A senior police officer read a statement on his behalf.
He had completely isolated himself from us over the past year, and we had no knowledge of his intentions.
He was described here as truly evil and lacking in any remorse or empathy. It was his mother's intervention that denied him the notoriety he craved, and he'll be in his late 60s before he's eligible for parole. School safety has been reviewed across Luton. Downing Street described it as an appalling case that will prompt a review of how young people can so easily become fixated with extreme violence online.
And Tom is in Luton for us tonight. Tom, what more did we learn about Nicholas Prosper during the sentencing today?
This is a very disturbing case, and we've spent time in the last few weeks speaking to some of the parents at that school. Of course, they're relieved that this was prevented. There is a review of school security and lockdown procedures, but this goes far further than that. How did this 18-year-old, as he was then, get to this point on the brink of a school massacre? And the answers lie online. We know that he had a very dysfunctional life online. He immersed himself in violence, in sexualised content and school shootings. And he was able to find the manifestos of school shooters from around the world quite easily, not hidden away on the dark web, but actually freely available on the surface web. And the police say that has to change. They need the help of tech companies and governments to make that change. And the Home Secretary today said that we all need to recognise the threat that this poses of young people absorbing themselves in very dark topics online, and that threat has to be confronted. It was very notable today that the police and the Crown Prosecution Service used his name very sparingly in the statements they made. They wanted this to be about his victims, those who lost their lives, and really not to give him the notoriety he really wanted. Tom, thank you.
Ukraine's president has insisted that lasting peace is possible this year after he had what's been described as a positive phone call with Donald Trump. His optimism came despite the collapse of a partial ceasefire agreed between Washington and Russia yesterday. Vladimir Putin agreed to refrain from attacking energy infrastructure, but Russia struck multiple targets inside Ukraine overnight. Sky's Data and Forensics Unit located strikes in Kiev, Kramatorsk, Slovyansk and Kupiansk. Well, this map shows Ukrainian energy infrastructure sites in the targeted regions and their proximity to those Russian strikes. In Dnipro, there was a direct hit on a railway power station. Russia also hit a hospital in the northern region of Sumy. In turn, Ukraine mounted a drone attack on a Russian oil depot near the city of Krasnodar. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
Despite the talk of a limited ceasefire, the attacks from the air continue. The unmistakable whine of a drone before it strikes a hospital in Sumy in northeast Ukraine. The wards were quickly evacuated. The frightened patients moved to safety. Outside, fire crews worked through the night, extinguishing the flames caused by the blast. In Finland, on an official visit, President Zelenskyy said the continued attacks showed Russia was not serious about peace.
Even last night, after Putin's conversation with Trump, when Putin said he was allegedly giving orders to stop strikes on Ukrainian energy, there were 150 drones launched overnight, including on energy facilities. Putin's words are at odds with reality.
But any agreement to halt attacks on energy infrastructure was also violated by Ukraine, according to the Kremlin. This, they claim, a drone attack on an oil depot in southern Russia, again happening just hours after the Trump-Putin phone call.
Unfortunately, we see that for now there is no reciprocity on the part of the Kyiv regime. There have been attempts to strike our energy infrastructure facilities, so we are closely watching the Kyiv regime.
The diplomacy is, though, continuing, this time a conversation between Trump and Zelenskyy. The US president describing it as a very good telephone call, adding that we're very much on track for a ceasefire. Quite a difference to that bust-up in the Oval Office. But does the optimism reflect the reality of this war? In Kursk, the Kremlin still has an appetite to fight. The small amount of Russian land Ukraine captured as a bargaining chip is shrinking by the day. And President Putin is certainly talking like a man holding the advantage, and one he will continue to press.
We all know very well that our troops have recently carried out a series of rapid, rather daring and effective operations and are completing the rout of enemy troops in the Kursk region.
The focus will now move to another round of talks, but on the front lines, the grim reality of this conflict continues. And with Moscow's war objectives unchanged and Ukraine's red lines on ceding territory the same, halting the killing may be much harder than Donald Trump predicted. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Let's cross live to Washington and our US correspondent, David Blevins. And David, Donald Trump says things are on the right track. Volodymyr Zelenskyy says peace is still possible this year. But that optimism doesn't appear to chime with the attacks that we saw overnight from Russia.
That's right, Gillian. There is a world of difference between Volodymyr Zelenskyy's hope of peace and the reality on the ground. More attacks tonight. That's why Ukraine is warning that it will respond in kind if Russia breaches the ceasefire that they've both signed up to. So if there is indeed a partial cessation of hostilities around energy plants, then that will be a fragile truce. And that fragile truce forms the backdrop, I suppose, for what will be a very delicate negotiation negotiation process due to begin in Saudi Arabia this weekend. Today has been significant in that Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy have gone from that unthinkably bad meeting in the Oval Office nearly 3 weeks ago to what the White House is describing as a fantastic conversation on the phone. The two men even exploring the possibility of America investing in Ukrainian power. But at the end of the day, Volodymyr Zelenskyy only has one precondition: security guarantees. Vladimir Putin has many preconditions. They remain far apart, and the man walking the tightrope between them is Donald Trump.
Indeed. David, thank you. Israeli forces are back on the ground in northern Gaza tonight, conducting what they're calling a limited ground operation as the 2-month ceasefire appears all but over. It follows the death of a UN staff member in an explosion at the organisation's compound in Gaza. 4 other humanitarian workers, including a 51-year-old British man, were injured. Tonight, Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the incident should be investigated and those responsible held to account. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports.
The United Nations says that one of their buildings in central Gaza was hit twice, shortly before 11:30 this morning. One person was killed, an international staff member. Others were wounded and rushed to hospital. A number of them are reportedly in a critical condition and need to be medevaced. At least one needed an amputation. The IDF has denied carrying out the strike, but has given no alternative explanation. And the United Nations has said that their compound was targeted and claimed it was not an accident.
There were no other buildings nearby. It was a very well-known premises, and it was in an isolated area.
Israel has been hitting Gaza for a second day after it broke the 2-month ceasefire yesterday morning. In what could develop into another major escalation, the IDF has also started a ground operation in parts of central and southern Gaza, and the country's defence minister has warned of more to come.
The Air Force attack against Hamas terrorists was only the first step. The rest will be much more difficult, and you will pay the full price. The evacuation of the population from the battle zones will soon begin again if all the Israeli hostages are not released.
The renewed fighting has been criticised by governments around the world, including some of Israel's closest allies.
I'm deeply concerned about the resumption of Israeli military action in Gaza. The images of parents carrying their children, young children, to hospitals have emerged over the last few days are truly shocking.
The resumption of Israeli strikes yesterday, despite the efforts of mediators, is a dramatic step backwards. Dramatic for the Palestinians, once again plunged into the terror of bombardments, and dramatic for the hostages and their families.
For a second day running, there were protests in Jerusalem against Netanyahu's government and the renewed violence in Gaza. Thousands marched calling for the war to end. Hamas tonight has said that it is ready for new ceasefire talks, but Netanyahu has said that negotiations will now only happen under fire. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
We are going to behead you. The message from some of the youngest children living in a Syrian detention camp that houses the wives and relatives of ISIS members. Officials have long warned that the lack of rehabilitation is helping to create the next cubs of the caliphate. Al-Hol is a closed camp which is guarded by Kurdish forces. As of 2023, it was thought to contain more than 40,000 people from 60 different nationalities. The World Health Organization says almost all are women and children who are either ISIS families or people who fled fighting elsewhere in Syria. The camp is severely overcrowded, with the aid group Save the Children describing it as dire. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford travelled there and sent this report.
This is dangerous ground for the Kurdish troops, so they go armed and in reinforced vehicles, ready for the attacks that they're regularly subjected to.
The threat of ISIS has increased both inside and outside the camp. Especially after the fall of the Syrian regime, it's gone up a lot, and we see attempts by them to escape on almost a daily basis.
They're guarding a mass of ISIS families where raids regularly find homemade bombs and guns. The detainees want out and they want revenge.
Oh, there they go. A lot of them throwing stones at the vehicle. The situation has always been tense in these detention camps, but right now it's reaching boiling point.
Some of these ISIS wives and families have been here for more than 6 years. Many of the children have been born here and don't like outsiders, particularly Western ones. In the women's market, it doesn't take long to discover where their allegiances lie. We love the Islamic State, she says. We're free in the Islamic State. Here, we are captives. We're going to behead you, they're saying, alongside cutting motions. Young ones right now, but they're feared to be the next generation of cubs of the caliphate if they don't get rehabilitation or psychological help. There are more than 20,000 children here, 60% of the camp, and they've known little else other than this caged upbringing. They, like everyone else here, taunt their Kurdish guards that ISIS will soon be back, in control and freeing them.
They say ISIS will come and they've got outside groups working with them. ISIS has never ended. ISIS lives on, and our duty is to try and protect and defend.
The ISIS attacks have more than doubled in the past few months. Here, the Kurdish security forces raid another sleeper cell. Syria's Kurdish minority in their enclave in the northeast have been feeling very vulnerable. The tens of thousands of people in the IS detention camps in their midst are seen as a real danger to them. I don't know what's going to happen, the manager of Al-Hol detention camp tells us, but it's a dangerous time. Maybe there'll be massacres against us Kurds. They'll take our women, our girls. I don't know what's going to happen. The Al-Hol camp fence is breached on an almost daily basis, and the commander overseeing security insists the Kurds can't deal with the ISIS threat on their own. Look, they've cut it here too, he says.
We want this ISIS issue to be resolved, but this requires the international coalition, America, France, Britain, all the coalition, to help so we can fight ISIS.
Hours after we talk to him, a family tries to break out of the camp. We're told they are later caught and returned. The camp management expect they'll try again and again and will probably succeed in time. The momentous agreement between the Kurdish SDF and Syria's new government, which will see them merge into one national armed force, comes after years of the Kurds defending themselves from threats in this enclave. It also means the new leader will have key Syrian support from an armed group with powerful American backing. And the new president gets control of this, oil. The bulk of Syria's oil reserves are in the mainly Kurdish northeast, which have been guarded and controlled by the US-supported SDF. We were taken on a tour of the oil fields, which the new president wants under his control and are key to Syria's economic revival, alongside the lifting of crippling international sanctions. Syria's a mix of competing interests. The oil workers show us footage of a bombing they blame on their Turkish neighbours. The wreckage stands as a reminder of the battle over this territory. Turkey's always viewed the Kurdish armed groups who guard the oil as a serious threat to its security and linked to a long insurgency inside Turkey. Merging with the new government forces that pro-Turkish armed groups helped get into power may be a way of quelling concerns in Ankara. There are Russian bases too in the northeast and west coast, and elsewhere Israeli forces in the Golan Heights as well as southern areas, they say, to protect the Druze minority. It is a dangerous time for Syria, with ISIS on the rise, a devastating outbreak of sectarian killing, and a new leader trying to govern a country torn apart by years of civil war. And it's the minorities who are the most worried. Alex Crawford, Sky News, in Kurdish-controlled northeast Syria.
A manhunt is underway in Blackpool tonight after a prisoner escaped while being transported to court. Sky correspondent Matthew Thompson is with me now. Matthew, what do we know about the prisoner in question and how he came to escape?
Sure, so his name is Jamie Cooper. He's 33 years old. He's originally from Blackpool. He was on his way to Lancaster Magistrates Court to face charges of assaulting a police officer and criminal damage. He's described as being about 5'7", medium build, close cropped hair. In fact, they've released a police mugshot of him that you can see there. And when he fled this morning, at least, he was wearing a blue coat, blue jeans and black trainers. Now, as to how he escaped, it's not entirely clear, but it seems he was either involved in or even faked a medical emergency some point before 9 o'clock this morning. GeoAmy, which is the company that was providing the secure transport to court, they have released a short statement in which they say, whilst in transit to Lancaster Magistrates Court, the vehicle had to pull over on the M55 in the Catforth area to deal with an onboard medical emergency. The detained person involved in this emergency then overpowered and evaded the escort officers and escaped from the vehicle. Now, searches are ongoing. Lancashire Police are keen to stress that this is a rare event, that they're taking it very seriously, but most importantly, they've warned members of the public, if he is spotted, they are not to approach Cooper and instead to immediately call 999.
Indeed, Matthew, thank you very much for that update, and that manhunt still underway in Blackpool. Whilst in transit to Lancaster's Magistrates Court, as we said, they did actually, the story we've just done. Apologies. A public inquiry into the crimes of Lucy Letby will not be halted, despite calls from former hospital managers for it to be suspended. The inquiry has been looking into how Letby was able to murder babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital between June 2015 and 2016. All the evidence has been taken and is due to report in November. But the hospital's former executives and Letby herself requested a pause pending the outcome of her latest challenge to her convictions. However, the inquiry chair said she was satisfied that the process has been fair.
But perhaps principal and most obvious amongst the concessions made by just about everyone is the acknowledgement that there was a total failure of safeguarding at every level.
The husband of Harshita Brella, whose body was found in a car boot in East London last year, has been charged with her murder. Her husband, Pankaj Lamba, is also accused of rape, sexual assault and controlling and coercive behaviour. It's understood Lamba left the UK and has not been located. 3 deaths are being investigated as part of a listeria outbreak linked to desserts supplied to NHS hospitals and care homes. The UK Health Security Agency said the bacteria was detected in a chocolate and vanilla mousse and a strawberry and vanilla mousse, both supplied by Cool Delight Desserts. They have not been confirmed as the source of the infections. A Royal Navy ship has escorted a so-called Russian spy ship as it passed through the English Channel. The Admiral Vladimirsky is officially classed as a research vessel, but it is registered under the umbrella of the Russian Navy. It always operates without tracking, a practice known as going dark, and has long been suspected of conducting covert surveillance for the Russian military. The mother of a young soldier who took her own life says she has sleepless nights, knowing abusers are still serving in the army. A coroner ruled that the military's failure to take action after 19-year-old Jaisley Beck was sexually assaulted contributed to her death. Both her mum has told Sky News that new measures announced by the military don't go far enough. Our social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson reports.
The suicide of gunner Jaisley Beck exposed an army culture of misogyny and abuse. The Ministry of Defence has now removed sexual harassment investigations from the chain of command in order to tackle unacceptable behaviour in the military. But Jaisley's mother says it's not enough and believes the soldier accused of sexually abusing her daughter is still being protected.
Why should they continue to carry on serving when we're left absolutely heartbroken? We have to deal with this for the rest of our lives. And it's not fair. It's absolutely not fair that no action's been taken.
The announcement that a specialist task force has been created to take over the investigation of bullying, harassment and discrimination in the armed forces comes the week after a Sky News investigation revealed widespread abuse. Army women told of the consequences of trying to report it.
He dragged me by the back of my coat up the stairs to the office, and he stood over me with his finger right in my face, screaming and swearing, like he was screaming so much he was spitting. And he was saying, "Don't you dare speak about that ever again."
The family of Gunnar Beck have praised other women for speaking out and say the army must now root out their abusers.
This causes me sleepless nights to know that they're still serving. It's absolutely heartbreaking to think, so this is still going on. All I want now is for action, for real action to be taken and to continue with the change and continue speaking up.
A Ministry of Defence spokesperson said the Army and MOD have undertaken to carefully analyse and assess all of the coroner's findings into the tragic death of Gunnar Beck. Addressing a committee of MPs, the head of the Army said progress has been made, but accepted there's more to do.
Inevitably, we have to recognise that there are some cultural and structural barriers still. There is an association of masculinity with soldiering.
Leanne says she'll continue to speak for her daughter and has urged Army women to keep fighting for change. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
The Tour de France is returning to the UK in 2027, with Edinburgh announced as the starting point for the famous cycling race. The Women's Tour will also take place in the UK for the first time. Stages of both races will take place in Scotland, Wales and England. Former Olympian Dame Laura Kenny said the tour would inspire young people to get involved in cycling.
To have the Tour de France and the Tour de France Femme here in Scotland, I think is absolutely fantastic. You know, events that we've seen in the past, like London 2012, the last time that we had the tour here, 2014, inspires the next generation, and that's what it's about. And you know what's really special about cycling? It's so accessible. Like, you can literally turn up on the side of the road, and that's how you inspire the kids to get involved. But also, their idols are like within touching distance. There's not many sports where you can literally lean over the barrier and touch your heroes, and that's why it's so special being back in the UK.
Dame Laura Kenny there. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the journalist and broadcaster, Daisy McAndrew. Amongst the stories that we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Metro about tonight's top story here on Sky News. Its headline, "Stopped on Massacre Mission." Do stay with us, we'll be right back.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. 19-year-old Nicholas Prosper, who murdered 3 members of his immediate family and planned a school killing the following morning, has been told he'll spend at least 49 years in prison. Moscow and Kyiv blame each other for breaching a proposed partial ceasefire, while Donald Trump says he and President Zelenskyy had what was described as a positive discussion on a frontline ceasefire. And the Tour de France will start in Edinburgh in 2027, and England, Scotland and Wales will share 6 stages in the men's and women's races. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the journalist and broadcaster, Daisy McAndrew. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Stopped on massacre mission. The Metro leads with the 49-year jail sentence for killer Nicholas Prosper, who shot dead 3 members of his own family and was on his way to commit mass murder at a local school when he was apprehended. The Express says the sentencing judge ordered Prosper to appear in court personally after he had initially refused. The Guardian says that next week's spring statement will include the biggest spending cuts since the era of austerity, as the Chancellor struggles to plug a huge budget deficit. The Eye reports that while no new tax rises are likely, there will be more cuts to the benefits budget coming up soon. As efforts continue to get a ceasefire in Ukraine, The Times says President Trump has his eye on acquiring Ukraine's atomic power plants, as well as getting access to the country's mineral wealth. Kevin's paper, The Mirror, features former Health Secretary Matt Hancock unrepentant at the COVID-19 inquiry over claims that friends of top Tories were apparently fast-tracked into getting huge contracts to provide the government with PPE equipment. The Telegraph says that because Labour is not forcing police to record criminals' biological data, they're now free to pick their own gender. The study report behind that story is also top story in the Daily Mail. The Financial Times says growth forecasts for the US have been cut because Donald Trump's use of trade tariffs against other countries has cast a shadow over the economy. The Sun leads with the court case of a casualty TV star who crashed her car and seriously injured a nurse while high on cocaine. And finally, a cute story in The Star showing dolphins dancing around the space capsule that returned 2 astronauts to Earth after 9 months stranded on the International Space Station. The headline, "What a flippering fab welcome home." I managed to say it. Bit of a tongue twister there. We're joined tonight by Kevin Maguire and Daisy McAndrew to take us through the newspapers. Good to see you both. We start, I'm afraid, with the grim story that we've been leading with on Sky News at 10. The headline there, "Evil family killer forced to hear his fate." And this is Prosper, 19-year-old Prosper, who was sentenced today for the killing of 3 members of his own family.
I mean, I think it is such a good thing that he was forced by the judge to come to court to face up to what she had to say. So Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb had to delay the sentencing and force him, or get him to be forced to come to the court. And I think in the words she was saying, it was also really notable that she was saying, your family who you killed, your mother and your 2 siblings, with their deaths, probably prevented a huge number of other deaths, and that they should be remembered and the community should be remembering them and having them in their thoughts, which I thought was really lovely, because so often with these cases, the criminal in this horrendous evil person is the one we're all talking about for obvious reasons, but you forget the victims somehow in that, and I thought that was really well said that she did that.
And Kevin, the police in their statements as well today made a point of not wanting to name him because it was that notoriety that he so craved, and they desperately wanted to deny him of it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think it was a mistake, though, in the police statement, because, look, he has been convicted. He's been found guilty of 3 murders. I think it's quite right. Sky News, you've been reporting his name. His name is on the front of newspapers. He's there in the picture. You can't escape it. You mustn't glorify him, but you can't ignore his name and who he is to tell the story. But there's lots of angles of being thrown up, lots of issues. But you're right, they have picked up. It's become a public area of concern about criminals found guilty of really serious crimes, manslaughter, murder, not turning up in court, refusing to leave their cells. And it's worked with a 19-year-old who's been persuaded to go. Others, it hasn't worked. Of course, judges have some discretion now on forcing them in, but they don't want disorder in the court. If you're going to have somebody sitting there shouting, laughing, smirking, or whatever, do V signs at victims' families, it would not work. And this government, like the last government, is going, and Daily Mirror campaigned on this, is going to give judges the ability to add sentences if criminals convicted don't go into court. But an extra year would not really, if you've got 49 years minimum, would probably not influence you. Maybe if the powers were, you're not going to get visitors for a year or 2 years, that might have an impact, but it may not as well. It's a very difficult area. It's quite easy to say you must be in court, but do you really want people bound and gagged and chained?
Yeah, because that's the thing, because you would have
kicking
to
and screaming,
physically
literally.
drag them to court.
But she's succeeded here, and I think it was quite right, and she's getting plaudits for it, the judge, and deservedly so.
The Telegraph, moving on to the discussion of gun laws being tightened in the wake of this horrendous killing, because he obtained the firearm with a forged licence, being a 19-year-old as well, very easily obtained, it seems.
And because this was one of the first questions, how on earth did he get his hands apparently legally on a gun? And of course it turned out it was illegal, because you said he had forged the document, but he had gone to huge lengths to forge it to such a degree that it was plausible and believable. And so, of course, the person who sold him the gun, thinking it was a lawful exchange, wasn't able to notify the police that this kid had wrongly, illegally obtained a gun, partly because you have 7 days. He only obtained it just before. You have 7 days in order to inform the police that a gun has changed hands, and they weren't able to realise that he'd forged it. But now it does seem that the police and Yvette Cooper are saying we need to tighten up these laws. But I mean, whether that means having some sort of biometric or something more sophisticated than a piece of paper, which I would have thought it was already more sophisticated than that, but it's not.
If you have prior notice, it can be checked on a database who actually does legitimately have a firearms licence. That's not to say somebody could pose as somebody who they are not. And of course, the law is always going to have to be chasing after criminals, because they will come up with ever more ingenious, devious ways of getting around it.
And most criminals don't have licences anyway. They don't bother with them.
No, that's right. They'll just get them unlawfully. But he went. I mean, I just think the person who sold the firearm must be feeling absolutely terrible at what happened. They were conned. But I can see why prior approval should be required before a gun changes hands. It's not like buying somebody's old TV or even a car, is it? It's a gun. And the tighter the gun controls are, the fewer people will be killed with guns. I remember post-Dunblane, the ban on handguns.
Exactly. Although we have a lot of people saying that some of these laws tend to be knee-jerk and not properly thought through.
Yeah, I thought Dunblane, though, the number of people who were killed, there was nothing knee-jerk about that. All those kids,
One of the suggestions in the article is that gun sellers will have to inform police before they actually hand over the firearms.
Yes, they delay it.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's a central database or whether each police force has its own database, and if they are all separate, let's merge them.
Yeah.
So it can all be checked very, very quickly.
My understanding is they are all separate by police, for force by force.
Well, it's time to put them together.
Yeah, I would agree.
To the Mirror front page, I don't know if you can link at all, but this is a comment from Gareth Southgate about, the example that young men have to be set. We have to show our young men that character matters, not money or status.
Well, Nicholas Prosper was looking at terrible stuff on the net in terms of child abuse, horrific violence. We've seen Andrew Tate has featured in convictions recently of the misogynist, people being whipped up by him. And I think Gareth Southgate, when he was England manager, he wrote that fantastic letter, Dear England, what patriotism means to him and should mean to us now, he did before the Euros last time around. And I think he's right. There's this toxic masculinity that's taken hold with some people. And it's got to be broken. Like, it's not cool, it's not big, it's not good. Would you really want to be that man now?
I think there are so many elements that are relevant. Obviously, Gareth Southgate talking about toxic masculinity, talking about incel culture, talking about gangs, but particularly social media, the influence of influencers on social media on vulnerable boys, and the fact that there's this report out at Centre for Social Justice saying that boys are lagging behind girls on every single metric, whether it's academic, whether it's employment, boys not in education or in the workforce are up 40% since the pandemic. Male suicides are up, and all of these issues are feeding into a sense that boys aren't being looked after, aren't being understood, and are looking for role models in the wrong places. They either want notoriety from being criminals or murderers, or they feeding into this 80-20 idea that girls aren't interested in most boys and that they should be, and that life's unfair and that they have to rebel against it. And I think all of these issues, weirdly, in the UK, we seem to be doing worse than the rest of the Western world on these issues, and many people like Gareth Southgate saying it's lack of role models, it's lack of father figures, something has to change. And we all as a society need to realise that there's an issue there and that boys are in big trouble.
Or we all suffer.
Yeah,
that's why it's good.
It certainly is a problem. How to deal with it is the question.
Yes.
Kevin, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, this story on the front of the Telegraph, reporting that France is set to hand citizens a guide on what to do if it's invaded. Serious story. Stay with us.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bungle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to are people who have died trying to cross into Europe. They say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer? No.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the journalist and broadcaster, Daisy McAndrew. Let's start with the Guardian front page, and we read that Rachel Reeves will announce the biggest spending cuts since austerity at next week's spring statement after ruling out taxes as a way to close the budget deficit. Any surprises there, Kevin?
Kemi Badenoch was today at Prime Minister's question. She was pretty poor, but she did call it an emergency budget, which I thought hit home. And cuts of up to 7% in unprotected departments, which is most of them. That is real deep. That is a return to austerity, however much the government tries to bill it as otherwise. The Financial Times had a nibble at this story today. The Guardian have taken it on. I've heard some departments could get 11% cuts over the period, which you cannot revive public services if you're going to be making cuts.
This is going to be incredibly difficult for a lot of those Labour backbenchers to stomach. They didn't go. It goes against the grain completely, and obviously we've had all the welfare cuts and problems with that, and you can see a lot of the backbenchers particularly, but we know some in the cabinet really struggling, and I think this is very, very difficult. You start talking about austerity, you start talking about being worse than when the Tories were doing it, and you've got a real problem of how Keir Starmer's going to hold his troops together in the face of this. Austerity is a dirty word in the Labour Party ranks.
Kevin, do you think we're going to see any resignations over this? Will it come to that?
Ministers rarely desire. I know Annalise Dodd did over the international development cuts. I mean, there's been question marks over would Ed Miliband, but I think he's so long in the tooth, probably not, because his green energy plan might be cut. But Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, is fighting hard against cuts in the Justice Department, because you're not going to be able to get rid of that court backlog, revive prisons, get probation going properly. If you have cuts like that, you just can't do it. You've got to be managing decline.
Yeah.
So it's you could put up taxes again. You've got the very wealthiest. You could do that, but Reeves is not, and there are question marks now around her. You hear Labour MPs muttering, "Will she survive?"
Yeah.
Haven't heard those mutterings.
Talk about Westminster.
Take us to the Telegraph, Daisy, and this story about France issuing survival manuals to citizens to prepare them for any invasion or imminent threat.
So this is a fantastic story that the Telegraph have got hold of via a French radio station, who are saying that these leaflets are being prepared and they're going to be distributed with a survival kit of what to do in the face of a big threat. And it's a survival kit saying you need to get things like, tins of food and batteries and torches, and saying that we will be ready in whatever the crisis is, whether it's natural, technological, cyber or security related. Obviously, a lot of people are saying this is to do with what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. But then some people are really mocking them for it, saying, we're going to be the best prepared, unlike in Sweden. While you're at it, how about in case of tsunami, tell us to do no snorkelling, is what one commentator has said again. So I'm not sure they're taking it as seriously as they're calling it the end of the world for dummies.
Is this a joke, Kevin?
In case of nuclear leaks, residents should lock their doors. I don't think radiation knocks on the door or rings the bell to wait to come into your house. It's never operated like that. I think we've seen when weapons have gone off. I mean, this reminds me of the 1980s, and the Thatcher government was widely mocked over protect and survive and how you're supposed to survive a nuclear war in Britain. It was like whitewash your windows and get under your table. No, look, let's try and prevent war. Rather than coping with the impact. Yeah.
Just got time to talk about, a minute in fact, to talk about the story on the front page of the Mirror regarding Matt Hancock. The headline, I do it all again. To what is he referring to?
So Hancock's been talking, as so many, into the COVID inquiry, and seems to have been saying that he would do it all again when it comes to those VIP lanes. Remember, this was the accusation that all the sort of, that the buddies were getting all these amazing contracts, and he was saying, well, we had to have some sort of system, and I'd do it all again. It's quite extraordinary. I was very amused. I was just looking at the Mail, who've done a big thing about the new look Matt Hancock, and I was thinking, what are they on about? Are they on about his haircut? And in fact, I'm very glad that the Mail isn't sexist, because this is something they normally do about women. They're commenting on the fact he's put on weight, but they're calling it his new look. And then they've done pictures of him in the jungle and him today. And I was like, well, at least what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I think he's always been a fathead. I mean, defending the VIP lane, I'd just say two words, Michelle and Morn. Yeah. No, or then we can go on to his local pub landlord. I mean, look, I think very few other ministers would defend it.
Kevin, maybe needs another stint in the jungle to lose some more pounds.
Yes, exactly.
Daisy and Kevin, thank you very much for the moment. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Thursday, the first day of spring, could well turn out to be the warmest day of the year so far before the weather begins to break down on Friday. First thing on Thursday, and it won't be quite as cold as it has been recently. There'll still be a widespread frost across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But further south, the temperatures should largely stay above freezing. Any mist will clear readily during the morning, and most places will have a fine and sunny day. The temperatures will rise steadily, with the warmest area expected in a zone stretching from South Wales towards London. This is where temperatures are most likely to reach 20 degrees, which would make it the warmest day of the year so far.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.